Well, welcome. This is the Olentangy Local Schools Board meeting, regular meeting. Tonight's Thursday, May 17th, if you can believe that. And we are in the Berlin room. Mrs. Hatfield, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Bartz?
Here.
Mrs. Fiesel?
Here.
Mr. King?
Here.
Mr. O'Brien?
Here.
And Mrs. Patrick?
Here. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nice chairs, Mike.
Thank you. Well, I love it when there's a full house. Yes. Welcome,
They're all gonna
everybody.
leave. Friendly
Give us our evening energy that we need. Let's see. Tonight we have two presentations.
Agenda.
Okay, agenda.
Oh, I always forget that. I apologize.
That's all right.
I will entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Hatfield, the roll, please.
Mrs. Fiesel?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Bartz?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
And Mrs. Patrick?
Yes. I have
Come on in.
this-
Come on in. Sorry.
I have the wrong agenda.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. I'll pull mine up.
All right, so the reason you're all here, welcome, is for our Community Service Awards, and Mr. O'Brien
Okay.
will be announcing. So when your name is called, will you please come up and take a picture with our superintendent?
And you?
What?
All right, so good evening and welcome. Tonight, the board will recognize community members who have given their time and talents to enrich our schools. The Olentangy Board of Education established the Community Service Awards in 1986 to honor community residents who have had a major impact on our children's education through their volunteer efforts or significant monetary or in-kind donations. I'm going to name each of the award winners and read to you some comments provided by those who nominated them. When your name is called, please come forward to accept your award and have your photo taken with Superintendent Mark Rafe and Board President Mindy Patrick. We'd also like to take a group picture of all of our outstanding Community Service Award winners. So after all the awards are presented, please gather in the lobby for a group picture. So I'll start with Gary Bucci, nominated by Oak Creek Elementary. Gary has been instrumental, please come up. Gary's been instrumental in establishing a positive partnership between Costco and Oak Creek Elementary by providing volunteers to read with our elementary students. Oak Creek students look forward to the reading sessions with the volunteers and benefit from the additional practice. Thank you, Gary. All right, next up is Natalie Chubb, nominated by Shanahan Middle School. Natalie has facilitated Shanahan's Debate Club and Olentangy High School's competitive speech and debate club for several years. Over the years, Shanahan teachers have remarked on the debate club students' clarity of expression and confidence they demonstrate in the classroom. Natalie's work with these students is a legacy of excellence, commitment, and service. Thank you, Natalie, for your dedication to our students.
If any family wants to come up while we're doing the picture, you guys just come right on up. Sorry. We can restage now.
All right, ready? Emil Duncan, nominated by Tyler Run Elementary. Emil has been a strong member of the Tyler Run PTO. This year, she's taken on the huge job of keeping the school sign current. We have all learned many interesting facts just from driving into the parking lot and reading the sign. Thank you, Emil. Jessica Dunsweiler, nominated by Jack Fetty. Jessica is a generous supporter of individual schools and the district at large. She donates her time and resources, most notably her business, Signed Gypsies of North Columbus, to contribute to the district. This year, She's erected signs to welcome back staff at convocation, celebrate teacher accomplishments, decorate the OEF Spirit of Olentangy Community Night, and spread general messages of kindness and joy. Tom Homan, nominated by Shanahan Middle School. Is Tom here? Go to the next one. All right. Mike Jones, nominated by Freedom Trail Elementary. Do we have Mike? Not a strong showing by the men. Sharon Jurowitz, nominated by Shanahan Middle School.
We know she's here.
Sharon's been a dedicated member of the 701 PBL team's architectural panel for the last 5 years. She's dedicated her time to provide information, insights, and pathways to innovation by coming into each classroom and working directly with students, listening to their project pitches, and offering feedback. Sharon is truly a dedicated member of the Olentangy community. Kristen Page. Kristen?
Yay.
Nominated by Arrowhead Elementary. Kristen is a valued member of the Arrowhead PTO. Over the past several years, Kristen has supported Arrowhead Elementary through her volunteer work. She provides creative ways to celebrate the staff during appreciation days and also worked tirelessly on the Arrowhead silent auction. The student, staff, and Arrowhead community appreciate her efforts. Taryn Rapp, nominated by Tyler Run Elementary. Mike Jones. We'll go back to Mike Jones.
Mike Jones, all right.
Mike Jones is here.
Yep.
Mike Jones, nominated by Freedom Trail Elementary. Mike has been a volunteer at Freedom Trail Elementary for a number of years. He has worked in the media center, the cafeteria, and in the classrooms. He's always happy and ready to help anyone in need. It's a joy to have Mr. Jones as a member of our Freedom Trail Elementary family. No Taryn Rapp? She's not here? Okay. Bethany Rapp, nominated by Tyler Run Elementary. Bethany's been a Tyler Run PTO member for many years, has been our PTO co-president for the last 3 years. She has been vital in organizing our walkathon and fall festival. Bethany, thank you for all of your hard work. Donna Ray, nominated by Shanahan Middle School. In addition to exploring soil with our 6th graders, Donna has worked with many 7th grade teams during our water cycle units at Shanahan Middle School over the years. She's also an integral part of our annual 701 PBL field trip to High Banks Metro Parks. Students respond to her hands-on instruction and acquire a new appreciation for conservation of our ecosystems after her visits. Bruce Runyon, nominated by Shanahan Middle School. Bruce is another dedicated member of the Project-Based Learning Project. He serves on our expert architectural panel and informs students about issues they need to consider prior to designing their school. Mr. Runyon provides the students with amazing visuals and renderings of potential school designs and layout options. Karen Sapp, nominated by Olentangy High School. Karen has served as president of the Olentangy High School Girls Cross Country Team Boosters since its inception 3.5 years ago. She has been an instrumental part of everything the boosters have done for the team. Karen organized most of the fundraisers and worked endlessly to raise funds for new uniforms and new sweatsuits. We cannot begin to express our appreciation for her time and effort. Rebecca Shalvin, sorry. nominated by Walnut Creek Elementary. Rebecca has been a parent at Walnut Creek for several years. She has gone above and beyond volunteering in many ways. She has led the book fair, which has become a cherished event here, and is truly because of Mrs. Shulvin. She has led the Pioneer Day Committee for several years and single-handedly orchestrated a program to allow the principal to give a book to every single student in the building on their birthday. She is truly an outstanding person. Matthew Stamp, nominated by Olentangy Liberty High School. Matt has spent the last 5 years volunteering a tremendous amount of time in athletic programming at Liberty High School, Liberty Middle School, and Hyatt's Middle School. He has served in various capacities during this time, including as game operations manager, event manager, statistician, PA announcer, and concessions coordinator. Mr. Stamp has been the treasurer and accountant of the Liberty Athletic Boosters and has played a significant role in numerous fundraising projects. Matt is an extremely hardworking individual who is patient and always willing to help. Tad Steinberg, nominated by Berkshire Middle. Tad has gone above and beyond in helping with events, trips, and volunteer opportunities for Berkshire Middle School students. He can always be found chaperoning music events, rounding up the students, doing what needs to be done before a teacher has even asked, and volunteering to move, set up, carry, and work on any equipment. We find Tad's enthusiasm infectious and are grateful for his involvement and assistance. Tricia Tromboni, did I say that correctly? Nominated by Wyandotte Run Elementary. Tricia has been the backbone of our talent show at Wyandotte Run. It is a big project and takes a lot of time. She runs all of the copies and checks the program for mistakes. We could not do it without her. Thank you, Tricia. Samantha Ullum, nominated by Shanahan Middle School. Samantha, along with her colleagues at Loth Inc., have been an integral part of making Shanahan Middle School's 7th grade project-based learning project about designing a school of the future a success. She has coordinated an information gathering site visit with us for the past 3 years. This year, Samantha told us that the students would not be able to visit Loth Inc. as they had in previous years due to construction. She told the teachers not to worry and that she would take care of it, and did she ever. She found an alternative space, coordinated presenters, and was invested throughout the entirety of the project. We are so grateful to her and her team for their continuous dedication to our students. Julie Wood, nominated by Tyler Run Elementary. Julie has done an outstanding job as treasurer for the Tyler Run PTO. Her many years of experience as a CPA have proven to be very beneficial for this role. Julie's knowledge and attention to detail has been a huge asset to our PTO and school community. Her endless hours of volunteer work are greatly appreciated. Becky Woodruff, nominated by Shanahan Middle School. Becky has joined us for several projects of the past 5 years. She welcomes our students into the Delaware Main Branch Library to field questions during our Delaware and Power of One project. Becky also joins us for our volunteer fair events and talks with our students about how they can get involved in the library community. Her charismatic personality draws students in and helps them develop a love for reading. Our last award is to Marla Ziegler. Is Marla here? She's nominated by Berkshire Middle School and Jack Fetty. Both the Continuous Improvement Committee and the Berkshire Middle School nominated Marla. Marla Ziegler has been an invaluable asset to Berkshire Middle School from the beginning. When the school opened, she worked for 2 years as a treasurer, helping establish our PTO by creating funds, tax information, and expectations of how a PTO would work with staff and students. In the past 3 years, she's been involved in various committees, served as our PTO president, making Berkshire an exceptional place to be. Marla's service has been greatly appreciated by all of our staff, students, and other volunteers who have benefited from her hard work, dedication, and passion. I spoke too soon about the last award. Tom Homan, nominated by Shanahan Middle School. Tom is the city manager for Delaware, Ohio. For the past 5 years, he has been part of the panel that provides students with information about the city of Delaware and has supported our students in their site visit by providing communication with city members and commerce. The feedback he provides to students at their final presentations helps them grow academically and creatively. 2 years ago, Mr. Homan invited a student group to present their idea to city members from Source Point, creating an essential, authentic experience for them. Thank you, Mr. Homan.
Yay.
All right, we will now return to our normal agenda, and you are welcome to stay, but we understand if you choose to leave.
Well, and I just want to make one comment that Olentangy is great because we have a great community and parents like yourselves that support our teachers and their students. And you're not just helping your own, but you're helping all students. So thank you very much.
Please don't forget about the group picture.
Group picture.
Yeah, group picture in the lobby.
This is your old one. I turned it down.
Thank you. I don't know what I printed.
I got nothing.
Oh, okay, so I got my work.
I know, you'll be back right.
Oh, I'm up next, aren't I?
You are.
Oh, see, that's the rotator. Not good.
What's that?
Oh, that's the dad, the guy, all this weird stuff. His son's got his arm in a sling with the,
Rotator cuff surgery.
yeah. I have that same sling at home. Okay, let's return to our agenda. It's time for the board president's report, and I want to keep my comments brief because we have 5 discussions on our agenda this evening. And I'm really looking forward to Jack Fetty and Sharon Jor, which is discussion on elementary classroom space and our subsequent discussion on fiscally responsible options to address our constant and rapid growth. I also wanted to call attention to our district leadership team, especially Krista Davis, for their efforts with the Orange Middle School Washington, D.C. trip.
Yay.
Kudos to you. They salvaged a very bad situation and figured out a way for 8th grader at Orange Middle School to have their Washington, D.C. experience. I personally have a Liberty 8th grader that is there right now, and I honestly feel as a parent like this is a rite of passage. It's the first time a lot of these kids have ever been truly independent and had to manage their time and their schedules, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity, and thank you to all that were involved for accomplishing this so that these children could go. It was a great team effort, and all that happened in the midst of contract negotiations. So it was, there's no good time for something like that to happen, and they really made lemons into lemonade. On April 30th, I attended our diversity committee meeting that was supporting military families. It was very eye-opening, as I had no knowledge about military families that live in our area, especially when they're in a non-military environment. So, they don't have their normal resources. It was very eye-opening, and it was a very good job on behalf of Jacqueline Powers and Heather Cole. I visited Arrowhead Elementary on May 4th. We remember the board presentation that the teachers gave on literacy? Well, I had to go see it in action. So I was greeted by the cutest little third grade student council members. They had their little speeches and they gave me a tour of the building. It was adorable. And then I walked into the fifth grade. It's a co-taught classroom, a truly collaborative environment. And the kids are doing, I think it's Lucy Calkins is the model that they're following. And it's a true push-in. They had intervention, gifted, and both teachers, and they modeled this book that they were reading, very sci-fi, different. But then you could see the kids really engaged in deep conversation, and you could watch the critical thinking. It was really neat because that's a puzzle that I know they all struggle with in middle school. So it was an outstanding day. I appreciate Arrowhead for hosting me. Then on the 11th, I went to Alum Creek Elementary for their enrichment day. And I have been through a few enrichment days. It's usually crazy. It was so orderly, it was scary. And the art that adorns their walls is nothing short of spectacular. So I had a great day there. And then on, I think it was the 8th and the 10th, myself and my fellow board members, we got to attend the high school senior awards. So this is an exciting month. We're looking forward to Sunday's commencement ceremonies. Mr. O'Brien and I both have graduating seniors, so it should be a slightly emotional day. I'll warn everyone now. But I just wanted to congratulate everyone on yet another successful school year, and we only have a couple days left. Mr. Rafe, how about your superintendent's report?
Good evening, and good evening to all of you who have chosen to stay with us. Thank you. I too am going to start off with a good thing and highlight the work of the leadership team and and the work of the community to step up and did I turn that off somehow? Yeah, no, it's coming. To step up and make the Orange Middle School trip happen. Prodigy Travel stepped up and helped us with taking over the trip and a generous donation, and then a lot of other people stepped up and gave generous donations. Probably most impressive was the senior class at Orange Middle School.
Yes.
You know, just
Orange High School.
Orange High School, sorry,
Orange
Orange
High
High
School,
School. Just immediately coming forward with the donation to help their younger classmates. So that just, again, I'm always so proud of how our community rallies together and pulls these things off. So, job well done. We hosted another superintendent for the day. So Rohan and I actually, we was a part of a raffle at the OEF Community Night, and Mr. Gillum, the principal at Hyatt's Middle School, won. I promptly told him I wasn't going to spend the day with him, so he decided to raffle it off to all the 8th graders. So Rohan won that, and we had a great day. Did a tour of Berlin High School and a bunch of other activities. Just another impressive young man in our district. So this was a great day. We highlight Orange High School again. This is something I would recommend to all of our schools to emulate, just like they did with the military signing. They do a signing day for our students who are pursuing something in the field of arts. So any musicians, visual arts, performing arts, I think we have the best art K through 12 art program in the state, and these students are taking full advantage of it and continuing their careers. They've received to date over $1 million in scholarships to pursue art-related degrees. So congratulations to all those students and their families. As Mrs. Patrick did indicate, we had senior awards at the 3 high schools last week. Just a tremendous, I can't recall the amount of money that was stated in scholarships earned by our students, but it is probably a combined $12 million between all 3 schools. Highlight the 3 class valedictorians from our 3 high schools: Hayden Toffner, Rory Ortierney, Nolan Vondracek, and Miranda McKibben. Just so everybody's aware, valedictorians are those students who have the highest cumulative GPA in their graduating class, have taken the highest number of AP credits, and have maintained A's in all courses. And they also had to attend our schools from in their 5th through 8th semesters. So somebody can't just move in the last semester and become valedictorian. Yes.
I just got word, like 10 minutes before the board meeting, that there is an additional valedictorian at Orange High School.
Oh.
Her name.
Oh.
I know. But excited that there will be 2 valedictorians.
Yeah, sometimes, because these
Yeah.
guys are named based off of 7th semester grades, as their policy is, and then if somebody meets the criteria with their 8th semester grades, they're added. So somebody will be quickly writing a speech before
Yeah, that's a
Sunday.
fast speech.
So I hope everybody saw this. Once again, our 3 high schools have been ranked as best high schools. U.S. News and World Reports gives out gold, silver, and bronze rankings. All 3 of our high schools are considered gold medal schools. Orange High School was the 3rd ranked school in the Central Ohio region. Liberty was 4th, and Olentangy was 6th. So we're always proud to see all 3 high schools in the top 10. We are the only multi-school district in Ohio to have all of its high schools ranked in the top 20 in the state. And our CIP goal is that they maintain their ranking in the top 500. As we know, U.S. News and World Report, Newsweek, and Washington Post all do national rankings for high schools. The methodology for U.S. News and World Reports involves 4 data points and factors in the percentage of economically disadvantaged students enrolled at the school. The data points include school's performance on math and reading tests, its graduation rates, its performance on advanced placement, and international baccalaureate exams. So they're always, as I've said before, I always know which high school is ranked the highest in whatever ranking comes out, because that's always the call I get from the principal. The first principal calls me, "Hey, did you see U.S. News rankings are out?" It was from Mr. Smith at Orange High School. So I didn't get a call from Liberty and Orange because they're not first. So that's just a great honor. We're very proud of the performance of our high school students. And as we say all the time, that's built on a strong foundation of our elementary and middle school staff also. As Ms. Patrick indicated, we do have 5 discussion items. So we have our second reading of our board policy updates. We all know Jack will be very brief in that regard. He will be more thorough in the student handbook update, because there's certainly some significant things to highlight there. Mr. Wright's going to highlight the changes to fees and athletic handbooks. Emily's going to do her second reading of the 5-year forecast, and then what I anticipate will be our longest discussion item is our elementary capacity discussion item, because as we know, they are tight quarters in our elementaries as we continue to plan for our future enrollment growth. Just a couple highlights of agenda items. We do have 3 administrators new to the district on for employment. Malika Jefferson is supervisor in pupil services. Kimberly Kelly is the new assistant principal at Berlin High School. And Jacqueline Larson is one of our new school community liaisons, or school social workers. We have renewal of administrative contracts that we're required to do by May 31st. So those are all the administrators who are on expiring contracts. Renewal of all our certified contracts for next year. Those are certified contracts that are expiring, whether it be a 1-year, a 2-year, a 3-year contract, and also some contracts moving to continuing contract status, and then renewal of classified contracts. So, and then for your approval, all the discussion items of the handbooks and the fees. There is a large purchase of Chromebooks and carts. That's part of our technology replacement plan, and also increasing some of our access to devices that will be dedicated to use in our elementary schools. So we're trying to increase the availability of computers in the middle school. Again, this is mostly due to implementations in state testing that we need to keep acquiring more devices to successfully implement that. A couple large purchases, the final purchases for the technology equipment at Berlin High School. And in closing, a couple important dates coming up, our 3 high school ceremonies. It's just a reminder to everybody, we are at the Schottenstein Center this year, first time. Be a little different setup. Olentangy High School's 10 a.m. Orange High School's 10 a.m., Olentangy High School's 1 p.m., and Liberty High School's 4 p.m. Those are tighter times than we've experienced in the past, but SHOT assures us they can load people in and out in a more efficient manner, so we can tighten that up a little bit. And it will be okay to get a little emotional. Don't worry, I would never say anything, Mr. O'Brien, should it happen.
I remember someone a little emotional during his speech last year.
Yes, that is true. That is true. We all know.
Luckily, we don't have to give speeches.
I hope.
Pause for a minute.
You want to? I have a speech written if you want to give it. Just see if you pull it off.
You're going to hear it 3 times.
So, last day of school, hard to believe with kids, is
Yeah.
May 22nd. It's just amazing how quickly the year goes. And then our next Board of Education meeting is June 14th. So, with that.
I just had one question on the agenda and what we're going to be approving tonight, and that is the order of Chromebooks, because at a previous meeting, we had discussed possibly looking at the students doing a one-to-one. And so, but that is not going to happen.
No,
So
we're not.
what
No,
you
we're going to
Not
continue to
right
discuss
now.
whether or not we want to go forward with the concept of a technology fee. I still believe in where I think we need to go with in terms of the concept of bring your own device. But we still have to get that technology use so pervasive that kids understand that in order to do school in Olentangy, they need a device. So, and Mr. O'Brien has made a previous comment, we don't want to be in the device business, and we really don't want to be in the, we have to have enough to do schooling effectively and administer that state testing. So I do think for some of our families that the idea of us providing them a device through a lease option, they paying a fee for it, I think that is a solution that we can, because it's got replacement, it's got a warranty, it's just, but, some parents there's multiple devices at home, so, to have another one. So we're working towards that. Right now, this is primarily part of our replacement program.
Any other questions? Okay, Mrs. Hatfield, the treasurer's report, please.
Sure. Good evening. We have several items on the agenda tonight. I will present the second reading of the 5-year financial forecast as well as the general fund budget. Those are both available for approval tonight. So we'll get into some of the details with that as we make that presentation, but just to let the community know and as a reminder to the board that both of those items go through the review process with our Finance and Audit Committee. So we have looked at that with those community members that serve on that committee, have worked through questions, and of course have talked about the 5-year forecast at the April 26th board meeting, as well as our Business Advisory Committee meeting this morning. We also have on the agenda our master service agreement for core services with Meta Solutions. Meta Solutions provides us with our annual student information services, meaning our Power School, Progress Book, Infinite Campus. They also work with us to provide IEP Anywhere, and they provide connectivity with our financial fiscal software and support that software. So this contract covers those items. We bring this contract forward each year for renewal. We also have our April financials that are on the agenda for approval tonight. The financials support where we have reported our 5-year forecast to end for fiscal year 18. We do have a large variance on our revenue side, but again, as we discussed on the 26th of April, part of that increase is due to prepayment of tax bills for 2017 so that folks could take advantage of the tax law as it currently stands. For tax year 2018, there will be a limit on the amount of state and local taxes that folks can claim on their tax return. And so people prepaid their 2017 bills in December, and it caused us a majority of that variance. So in the 5-year forecast, we also made that adjustment to show that it's coming in fiscal 18, but fiscal 19 will be shortened by that because it's just a timing variance. And our expenditures are expected to come in on target overall. We also have appropriation and minutes on the agenda for approval. Those are being brought forward in general compliance and standards with our practices. And then we also have several donations that we would like to recognize. With a presentation of the board awards, we recognize that we have lots of different types of donations. People give in their time and efforts with their expertise in their careers, and just general support for their students or grandchildren that are in the area, and we really appreciate all of those in-kind donations as well. Tonight we'll formally recognize from Annette Averly to Wyandotte Run Elementary School, a cello valued at $800. To Glen Oak, from the Glen Oak PTO, we have Chromebooks, iPads, and assorted reading materials and playground equipment that totaled over $13,000 that we would like to recognize. We have lunch for the Olentangy Think Tank from ClassLink to the district, totaling $1,000. And from McGraw-Hill to Olentangy Local Schools, we have keynote and workshop speaker for Think Tank as well, valued at $7,000. So we would like to thank all of those individuals and organizations for their donations. And I would like to say that with the Orange Middle School DC trip, we have been receiving donations to help support that event and make sure that it operates as it should, or as the kids had intended to be able to travel with that. We will put together a formal presentation or more specific notes on those donations and recognize those donations at a later board meeting. So we do know that folks are interested in knowing about that, and we will do that at a future board meeting. So thank you for all of those who have supported that effort to make sure that our kids still were able to attend. We appreciate it. With that, we'll take any questions.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hatfield. Do we have any public participation for general comments?
No, we do not.
Okay. All right, well, we'll move into our discussion items. And first on our list is Mr. Jack Betty, our Chief Academic Officer, to give the second reading of board policies.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'll gladly present Exhibit A. Do you have any further questions about the policies that we read at the last meeting?
I have one clarification, and that is on policy, it's 0169.1, public participation. And from what I have read in the policy, we will do away with first and second and just have one public policy area on our agenda.
Public participation, correct,
Yeah, public
yes.
public
Streamline.
policy.
Right.
Yeah, we're streamlining it, so you can
Right.
come up and speak in one area.
The
and it can
previous
speak on
process
everything.
had general comments and then comments directed at the agenda, and there was always confusion for the public, so we thought streamlining it would be best.
Makes sense.
Good idea.
I guess that's it? No
enough
further
for me.
questions? Okay. All right, we'll stand there.
Yep.
Stay where you're at, and we will now listen to the student handbook updates.
Sure. All right, so each year we revise the student handbooks. There's a different handbook for each level, elementary, middle, and high school. We form a handbook committee of administrators at each of those levels that meet throughout the year to review what's working in the handbooks, anything from their practice that they see that needs to change. We also cross-reference any policy revisions from the board that affect handbook changes or any other requests from department directors, principals, or just general clarification that's needed. Some of the notable revisions this year, there are not very many significant ones, so I'm just going to point out the big ones to you, but you do have the strike-throughs in your exhibits. Student attendance has been updated to reflect House Bill 410 implications. We've talked about that previously. That's where the state requires us to count hours instead of days for student attendance, and then send letters of warning to students when they hit a certain threshold of number of hours absent. And the disagreeable point there is that we have to send those letters whether the student is absent for an unexcused or an excused reason. But the handbook nevertheless represents the law. We've also added to the code of conduct vaping devices and e-cigarettes to be included in the prohibited items. And then we have also updated the hazing, harassment, intimidation, bullying, and sexual harassment section. And within that section, we clarified a definition of each behavior. We explicitly stated that such behavior will result in a suspension and up to a recommendation for expulsion, depending on the act. And we also pulled out and emphasized that racial, sexist, or abusive comments or actions will not be tolerated and will result in a suspension and could include up to the recommendation for an expulsion based on those acts. Those are the notable highlights from the handbook. Were there any other questions that you had from the strike-throughs?
No, just those last two came forward because of the student presentations that came before the board.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I, applaud those students for coming forward, and it's coming to fruition.
And just, there's actually, I just heard a presentation at a Central Ohio Superintendent's update on proposed legislation that is recommending requiring suspension for harassment, bullying and harassment. So this policy is all inclusive of that.
Thank you, and I appreciate us setting the tone of what is and is not acceptable in our schools.
Absolutely.
Okay, next we have a presentation from Mr. Wright, our Chief of Administrative Services, on our student fees and athletic handbooks.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for having me in, and want to quickly go through a summary of proposed changes to Exhibit D3, the 2018-19 Athletic Handbook, in conjunction with the work done for the student handbook around racial, sexist, or abusive comments by student athletes. We have added more restrictive language to require a suspension and possible additional school discipline for acts by our student athletes. And we also wanted to address the actions by fans or spectators at contests, and we did increase our language. While the typical fan is not going to have access to our student athlete handbook, we do want to have language in there that comments like that will result in removal from contests. We wanted to mirror those strengthening languages in our athletic handbook.
And I just had a clarifying question on that. If as a student is the fan and they're at an away game and that those actions occur, they can still be punished for that, even though they're
Absolutely.
not on our property. They're at another
Correct,
school.
because they are covered at a
Right.
game, because that is a school event, even though it's at a different school. Our students are still held to the student handbook. Correct. An additional strengthening of language, we want to further address tobacco use by athletes and the continued proliferation of vaping and e-cigarettes. We will no longer separate tobacco or vaping use from alcohol or other drugs as it's been in the past. So now any violation involving tobacco, alcohol, or drugs will result in the same consequence, and that consequence has been in place for several years now, and that is a loss of participation from athletic contests. That can be reduced through education and counseling. So we wanted to strengthen that language as well. We did add, again, the other last two are housekeeping items. We wanted to clearly articulate that our student athletes are expected to be in school the day of contests or practices and required for attendance in 4 full periods at the school in order to participate in physical events that same day. So we wanted to clearly add that language. And the last is a change we wanted to make last year as a result from our booster groups who so kindly award our student athletes for their scholarship as well. But we have increased the GPA clearly in the handbook this year, moved it up from 3.250 to 3.500 to earn a Booster Scholar Athlete Award. So those are the 6 changes that we have in the handbook. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
I have one. It was regarding the 4-hour rule on competition days. Isn't that already in place with OSH?
OHSAA?
OSHA.
They really do not have language that is as specific. So they send it back to local control, and when they do that, we want to make sure that we put in what we expect. We expect that all of our student athletes are in a minimum of 5 classes. So That's a little over half a day, and so we want them in school a half a day in order to participate that evening.
We're already practicing that, right? Because my son was sick, but told me I couldn't pick him up until 11.
We are, yes, we are, but we've not had the language in there to
Okay.
solidify that.
Well, he knew the rule.
For a Saturday contest, do you have to be there?
Saturday contests are not contingent upon Friday. It is events that day.
Thank
Great
you.
question. Any others on the athletic handbook?
Just on that same one, our coach is notified that a student athlete
It's
is
hit or
missed part of
miss.
the day?
It is hit or miss just because of the volume of our high schools. There is a file created of absences. I do not know that it is forwarded yet to our coaches.
But if a coach puts that kid in and kid, just coach says go in, he goes in, there's no penalty to the student
No, it's a
athlete,
local
right?
rule. It's only a local rule.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the athletic handbook? Okay, then I'll shift quickly over to Exhibit D4, student fees. We continue to look for ways to decrease our fees or to, at minimum, hold them firm, and I'm happy to say we have very few additions this year. We did have a decrease in our 6th grade fee due to a programming change. We continue to look at how we can be efficient, and so we have cut a portion of our 6th grade fee in half. We do have visual art updates. We have many students who just thirst for our visual art classes and quickly exhaust the ones that we have that are in the books. So we have added a fee for those students who create their own course in advanced studies or credit flex so that we can still be able to supply them with what they need to successfully complete the class. We have asked for an increase in our DECA fees. We send so many students from our 3 high schools each year to the national competition, and the weight upon our respective budgets continues to increase, so we wanted to have a little bit more availability to support those trips for our success in our DECA program. Throughout the fees, we have just the various increases because a handbook cost goes up or shipping cost goes up, so we reflect that in our changes. We've added 2 new courses at Olentangy Academy as we will be in our final phase in. We'll be in our 4th year of courses at Olentangy Academy. So we are adding a biomedical innovation course for our seniors and an engineering capstone course. So there are respective fees being sought for those. And our last increase was a modest increase to our Naviance platform that all high school students use from 9th grade on. And so there's a 50-cent increase in that. It's not very valuable to freshmen and sophomores, but they start to populate the information. It is a great resource for our college search students throughout their junior and senior year. So it is a program we truly like. Any questions on the fees that we are presenting for updates? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mrs. Hatfield, the 5-year forecast. Second reading.
Thank you. Our presentation for the second reading, excuse me. Let me try that. I'm a little shorter than the rest of our speakers. So our second reading of the 5-year forecast presentation is an abridged version of the presentation that we gave on April 26th. So please let me know if you have questions as we go through a couple of slides that we're going to reiterate. One of those slides we want to bring back is the revenue versus expenditure. So this is line 6.010 on the 5-year forecast, which is an exhibit for tonight's board agenda. And what this really represents is our expenditures versus our revenue. And as you can tell from the graphics, our expenditures begin to exceed our revenue in fiscal year 2019 and continues forward in the forecast. It's a line that we want to keep an eye on. It's an important line for us to follow, but we want to also reiterate that the dynamic of this comes from or is driven by the fact that we are a locally funded district. We have 6% of our overall revenue comes from the state through state funding, foundation funding, and the rest of our income and revenue comes from taxes of one form or another, whether residential, commercial, or PUP. And so as we collect those operating revenues from a levy cycle, you will see that spent down, and then we will continue to monitor that rate at which we spend down those revenue to talk to our community about the next levy cycle. So because of our state funding situation, we are not an if levy community, we are a when levy community. We always have to talk about when the next levy item will be coming, or when we think that will be coming, because we are locally funded. The next slide shows our projected unencumbered ending balances. So as you can see, we have an unencumbered ending balance for fiscal year 18 at about 83 million and land at about 11 million at the end of the forecast for fiscal year 2022. The bottom number represents the number of days cash balance on hand at the end of that fiscal year. We have an informal policy that we would like to see, at least 1 to 2 months cash balance, so 30 to 60 days cash balance on hand when we start discussing our next levy cycle and what that might look like in terms of timing. We are able to meet our 2016 campaign promise of 3 years, which would take us through fiscal year 19, and fiscal year 20 would put us at 4. So looking at the cycle as we have with this information in this forecast, we look like we should be about 4 years and be able to meet that campaign promise, and then would talk about continue to monitor that expenditure over revenue piece in the next year to start thinking about and planning our next operating campaign. General risk to the 5-year forecast. I always think it's important to kind of reiterate these points. We've talked about being locally funded versus state funding, but another component of that state funding issue is that we will have 3 state budgets that affect the 5-year forecast. Currently, House Bill 49 will affect our current fiscal year of 18 and fiscal year 19. And then the next, we will have 2 more biennium budgets that will impact the 5-year forecast. We have a modest increase of 5% in our state funding assumptions. But, that's always subject to the state budget and how that gets passed and what legislation puts through for education funding. Again, we talked about being locally funded, what that means in terms of levy cycles and how we need to prepare. We want our community to understand that we are being fiscally responsible, but we are dependent upon tax dollars to help make up that difference in the state funding that we don't receive. Our enrollment projections, of course, are a critical component of our forecast. As we note in November of each year, we have a new enrollment projection that comes forward to the board and is presented and approved to help us stay on top of and in front of enrollment growth. That impacts our student-teacher ratio, our classroom ratios, and of course our staffing model, which is one of our more expensive components to the forecast, which relates to the next bullet, our personnel and insurance expenditures. They, in total, make up about 85% of our operating expenditures. We are a service entity. What we provide our community is the service of education, and so it makes sense that those are the largest components. Personnel and insurance expenditures will be impacted with our negotiated agreements with our 3 union representations that we have. We have our teachers union and our 2 OPSE organizations. Our current contracts expire at June 30th of this year, and so negotiations will have an impact on those expenditures as we move forward and continue to future plan. Our House Bill 264 project is a project that is in place to help with our energy conservation efforts. That project primarily focuses on changing our lighting to LED lighting, and it also focuses on updating our HVAC and airflow controls. At this time, we feel that the project is moving forward in a positive way and that it is going to provide the district with our energy and utility cost savings as projected. So we'll continue to monitor that and give updates, but changes in that project could have an impact on the 5-year forecast as the savings from our utilities are set aside to make the payments on the funding for that. And finally, our growth in preschool and special education programming has an impact on our facilities, the amount of classroom space that we have available in our elementary division. And so as we look through the lens of expanding preschool services, specialized learning centers, and other special education programming, we're looking at how that impacts our 24-to-1 classroom ratios. That produces a smaller classroom ratio where we might have to have 8 or 16 students in a classroom. So that has an impact on elementary space and staffing as well. So that's a risk that we will continue to monitor, and that's why we have one of the main reasons why we have Mrs. Jurovich and Mr. Fetty giving us an update on where they think we are with the capacity needs. And with that, I will take any further questions about the forecast. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, please welcome Sharon Jurowitz. She chairs our Facilities Committee, and Jack Fetty for an elementary capacity discussion.
Good evening.
Good
Thanks for
evening.
having me here tonight. Sorry I walked in front of you earlier, Mark. I saw that and it looked the same as mine. I thought I was ready to go. And so I'm just going to come up here and start speaking. So I apologize for that.
It's all right. No worries.
So tonight we're here to talk about the capacity in our elementary schools. This first slide shows our forecast history. These are the different forecasts that we've presented to the board in the past. Just to give a little bit of background, in 2014, our forecast was showing an actual decline, and that we were presenting that there was no need for additional classrooms at that time. In 2015, things were picking up. We presented that there would be a need for classrooms in 23-24. Our 16 forecast showed need in 18-19. Since then, we had presented opening Shanahan Preschool. It opened with 12 additional classrooms this year. And then our forecast that we presented to you in November showed that we'd have a zero balance of classrooms in 2021 and an actual deficit of classrooms in 21-22. So that's just a background of where we've been. We've kind of been predicting that this day is coming, and we've been working very hard to find different ways to accommodate the growth in elementary school. These next 3 slides just show the history and our projection of what's happening in the elementary schools. This is just K through 5, and it shows that since our last elementary school opened, we increased by 518 students. Over the next 10 years, we're forecasting an increase of 1,717 K through 5 students.
Wait, and how many years?
In the next 10 years.
Okay.
For pre-K only, if you look at over the last 4 years, you can see pre-K has been a bit of a roller coaster in the history. It's gone up and it's gone down. It's been quite difficult to predict, but over the past 4 years, it has increased significantly, nearly doubled. It's increased 282 students in the past 4 years. The green going forward is what we presented in November as what we thought was going to be what's happening for preschool over the next 10 years. We know we need to adjust that because we're already lower in 10 years than we are this year. So we are looking at what that's going to be. So the 2 different lines, the blue and the purple going forward, are some ideas that we're looking at of what that pre-K growth is going to be, either a 2% increase each year or a 5% increase. Jack was suggesting that we go ahead with looking at the 2%, even though enrollment in preschool might be higher, closer to the 5%, we are able to accommodate a lot of the preschool needs outside of the classroom space. So for classroom need purposes, we're looking at that 2% going forward.
So I'll just jump in there. So as a reminder, we have to start serving students at the age of 3 who have disability in the district. Our preschool ratios are mandated by the state. Historically, they've been 8 students with disabilities in a classroom. This year, the state reduced that to 6. In the future, we believe it's going back up to 8, but they're telling us to follow 6 next year, but we're going to follow 8 because the law has changed. They just haven't written the rules to enforce the law yet, although the law changed with the last budget bill. Obviously, our numbers are increasing, but we are trying to increase our itinerant services. That's where we serve the preschool students outside of the school buildings. We have had success with that over the past 18 months or so in increasing the number of students served by itinerant services, but that is a slow process. The parents have to agree. It has to be the right need and fit and match for each student. The other aspect of pre-K that is hard to predict is it is a parent choice, even when the student has a disability, if they want them to come to the district for service. And then also, it's a parent choice when the student turns 5, whether or not they remain in preschool for another year or they matriculate to kindergarten. So there's a lot of extra variables in that 3 through 5 age range that we don't see, especially after kindergarten.
This, excuse me, this slide combines the 2 previous. It has pre-K through 5, so all enrollment in elementary school. Since our last elementary school opened, we've increased by 754 students. Our typical elementary school design capacity is 650. Looking at the next 10 years, we're looking at increasing by 1,855 students. What we've been looking at as one of the options is the student-teacher ratio. The 2 horizontal lines near the top of this slide are indicating sort of the sweet spot of where we want to stay with ratios. We have 24 number for student-teacher ratio. That is what the teacher have agreed to. The bottom line is sort of where we prefer to stay. We feel that that's a good work for the classroom. A lot of our predictions are looking at maxing out that ratio. And you can see here, looking forward in 4th and 5th grade, 3rd grade too, you can see that green line. It's going above what our ratios are allowed to be. So we really need to look at if that is even an option of increasing that or what we do to reduce that ratio. This just gives a bit of history and looking forward of what our ratios are. The little green ticks at the bottom where when different elementary schools have opened. So you can see that our ratios have gone up and then a school is open, so it drops down and it goes up again. You can see now that gold color is just going up and up and up. The blue lines are how we think that we can accommodate with some addition of classrooms and trying to keep that ratio in between those 2 horizontal lines. This information was put together in conjunction with Dijon Richter. They do the 50-year or forever forecast that they do every couple years. And this was just looking at 3 different scenarios. The yellow is looking at 500 housing starts a year, green is 750, and blue is 1,000. So you can see that depending on how quickly we grow, we max out higher and sooner, the more houses that are being built. Over the past 5 years, we've averaged about 620 housing starts, so sort of between the yellow and the green. Last year, we were above 766, so we're between the green and the blue. So we will be closely looking at how quickly those houses are coming on, because that greatly impacts how quickly we need additional classrooms. So we definitely need classrooms. I think we've definitely come to that realization. We've opened Shanahan Preschool. We still need classrooms. So we have looked at different options. as a facilities committee and working with administration. We looked at increasing student-teacher ratios. We looked at finding an existing building that's in the district that we could convert into a preschool classroom space. There aren't any available that would meet our needs for that. We've discussed using modulars. As a facilities committee, we're not in favor of that because of the rental costs and because of the security aspect of the modulars. We looked at temporarily relocating a portion of preschool at Berlin High School. Berlin will be opening next year. It will have empty classrooms as designed because we don't have any seniors in there, and juniors do not need to go there, so there's open space. We've looked at opening just a pre-K only building. If you recall, that was one of the options that we looked at before we did Shanahan Preschool. We found that it had a lot of limits moving forward. Since it was designed specifically for pre-K, it limited our options in the future. And then the last two were things that we looked at of actually creating more classrooms, adding on to existing elementary schools or building a new elementary school. So knowing that we need classrooms and knowing how we can do it, how do we do it with the time frame that we have and the available money that we have? So you can see on this chart, that gold that's the number of classrooms we have. The blue is how many we need. There's obviously a big gap there. I love these charts. You don't even have to look at the numbers.
You're the only one.
So looking at additions on elementary schools, we priced out 3 different sites, 3 different specific schools that we looked at, and they just vary on specific items in there, whether they need a playground change or sanitary change or connector in the building change. So most of them are coming around just over $3.4 million for a 6 classroom addition. That averages out to $574,000 a classroom. So with the money that we have available right now from a previous levy, we have the ability to do 3 additions at this point. Looking forward at a new elementary cost, again, we looked at 3 different options. One was just our typical elementary school, the box elementary that we've been building. Doing any changes that we need to do. There's been lots of code changes since our last elementary was built. It has 29 classrooms at $633 a classroom. We looked at doing the elementary school with the 6 classroom connector, which is what we've done in the past where we've connected an elementary to a middle school. That would have 35 classrooms at $580,000 a classroom. And then we looked at just taking our typical box and stretching it out enough that we could fit 6 more classrooms in. This would need to be massaged a little bit, but we know that it could work. We looked at it enough to see if it was possible. 35 classrooms at $562,000 a classroom. So when we combine all of the numbers and the need for classroom together, this was a scenario that we came up with, which is looking at in 2019 opening 3 additions. That would be 6 classrooms at each addition, so 18 total classrooms. Then in 2022, we would open an elementary school 16, though a larger version, one with 35 classrooms. And then again in 26, we would open elementary 17, again a larger one. The timeline for that, as you can see on this, we have the current levy, and that arrowhead is extending it out to 3 years. But the time that the next levy would need to be would be in 2020, so that's actually 4 years since the last levy. And then we would need another levy again for 17, and that would be 4 years after that. So we have the ability to do the 3 additions now, because we don't need a new levy for that. We would need to release the bonds. Emily can get more into that. But the other two new elementary schools would need to have levies.
So, Sharon, in that instance, you do the additions now, and then a larger elementary in 2022, and another elementary in 2026. Are you done?
No.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, no.
Sorry.
People keep
No, yeah.
asking, when are we done?
Well, if you look at the projections, right, you've
And
got
it's like 2048.
three scenarios that go 15, 17, 24, then you settle in at 19. Yeah,
Right.
good.
Right. If you look at the
2045.
slowest, at 500 housing starts a year, we're looking at maxing out at over 22 elementary schools. Now, that is based on the 29 classroom elementary school. And we will have fractions because we have Shanahan Preschool is a fraction of an elementary school. So that's like an equivalent. If we do some larger elementary schools, that number can come down. We're trying as a facilities committee to start looking at it more in terms of classrooms instead of number of schools, because I think that's misleading. We could open one humongous giant elementary school right now, and that would be the end of it, but.
Even then.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really the number of classrooms that we have.
A key point Sharon touched on is class size.
Yeah.
So we try to, in K through 2, keep a 22-to-1 ratio district-wide. So you take all the kindergarten, first and second grade classrooms across the district, we want the average ratio to be 22-to-1. 3 through 5, we want it to be 24-to-1. So we're at a point starting next year where we cannot create any additional classrooms, so that ratio will start to rise as enrollment continues to come into the district. Because we keep K2 under 24-to-1, which is our contractually negotiated ratio, we have some room to grow those. We're not thrilled about having
Right.
K2 classrooms above 22, because that's why we've always kept them at 22. We feel that's the ideal number. But we do have that flexibility as we come into the coming year. We're not going to be able to create new classrooms,
Right.
but we can start to increase, and will have to start to increase class size.
And with this projection here, just to point out, this is based on a 24-to-1 ratio across the board. This is maxing it out. This is taking what they have predicted as the number enrolled, dividing by 24, and that's what we get. This isn't trying to be generous and better classroom sizes. This is packing them in. So yeah, when you get to the timeline and you see that we need an elementary school and then we need another one in 4 years, I'll be back again.
One slide that we didn't get to touch on, I think it was your last one, where
Yes.
the properties are available.
Right.
Yes.
And that's, Curve Road is up, I guess, the furthest north. The Curve,
Hit the red button, you can do a laser pointer there.
yeah,
if you wanna show
the Curve
people.
Road is the furthest north.
Yeah. So we have two different shapes. Just to point out, the blue on there is vacant land. It is land that we have predicted will eventually be filled with houses and students. And you can see where the majority of the blue is in the north part of the district, specifically in that area. That just gives a little bit of background. That's what we use to forecast what that growth is. The rectangular shapes are the shapes indicating where we could potentially have new elementary schools. This isn't all, there's other land available. There's been discussions with different developers and things like that. I'm not showing those. This is land that Olentangy already owns. So we have 2 spots on the west side. We have one on the north, and then we have one that is adjacent to Berkshire Middle School. And then the circles are representing what we had looked at as sort of the top sites for doing additions onto elementary schools. And that's based on where the utilities are, how the parking works, the property lines, all of those things went into picking out where those would go. It's not based on schools we like or don't like or anything like that. It's purely scientific.
That's what I was going to say.
Remember, we also need to remember too that, so Curve Road is an example, all the way at the north. a lot of vacant land around it. The other issue that we have is there's no utilities there.
That was my next
That's a
question.
So
significant
if that's a
cost.
site we select, we have to pay to have Bruce water, sewer, and electric all to that, or is it just water and sewer? Okay, so all three, which is a significant cost to that potential building footprint. And it also means if we pay for it, then the developer's signs go up the next day.
Right.
And so they
Right,
that is
put
true.
houses there. They don't have any obligation to put those in. I mean, at some point they will, but if we do it first, we're bearing all the cost for that. And there's not anybody up there yet. So while that's a nice piece of property, it's probably not the best place for us to consider. And something the board's gonna have to consider is if we move, when we move forward, we're going to have to rank these
Yeah.
these sites, and we're going to have to look at those. And Bruce has been great with his support, and Sharon and Jack as well. But that's something we're going to have to take into consideration. And I don't know, do we have an idea for us to run water, sewer, and electric there, Bruce? Are we looking at 7 figures? I mean, if you just took a stab at it, nothing. We'll delete it from the record. I mean.
You're certainly high six figures, if not approaching that.
Okay.
We haven't really looked at that. The other thing just working on that with the Olentangy Sanitary a few weeks ago in insisting development committee on that. And the Curve Road site, Delaware County Sanitary was certainly thoughtful in listening to us and sympathetic to the plight, but they don't even have a pathway they feel to get to Curve Road for about 5 years to where we could even physically within any economic and timeline, make that work, make that site work with what Delaware County's trying to do with the sanitary system.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Thank you. So it's a significant cost, and there are some logistical design challenges.
Well, I know that the utilities, infrastructure's in for Berkshire, the extension
Yes.
there, but look at where the growth is
Right.
north and west, so, and you've got Johnny Cakes just up the road there too. But what about Bunny Station and what's the other?
Clarkshaw.
Clarkshaw. Where are the utilities on those?
You're better situated there. Sawmill Parkway coming up, and certainly by the Clarkshaw would make that a much more desirable site with that. And that's probably from a short Berkshire, and you're right.
Yeah.
That is set up that way. But short Berkshire is probably the next site that is probably from a utility standpoint the most feasible right now for the district. Of course, there's a lot of other things that go into that site selection that you already touched on.
Yeah, we keep hearing that we're going to have land in Evans Farm, but we don't have any that in writing.
It's more in the area.
Two.
It's more in the area where all our growth is.
Yeah.
Well, that's, again, when you look at the Clarkshaw site, right now, Liberty Tree Elementary's, when we did
Yeah.
the redistricting and you drew the 2-mile bubble, there was 124 kids in the 2-mile bubble at Liberty Tree. Clarkshaw Road, that's right by Liberty Tree,
Yep.
so there's just not population density there. And we may have to look at an alternative site, like we did when we kind of turned and burned on Freedom Trail, because of where all the population density is. And I think the community would be more agreeable to us thinking about a more thoughtful site. It's just, there's no population density on the Berkshire site, close to the Berkshire site.
Right.
It's already, because we're still bringing people out of the south end
Yep.
to get up there, and it is a difficult,
And I think Mrs. Feasel brought up before too. So when we have property assets that sit in places that are not ideal,
Right.
we can't sell those assets. You brought that up a couple or 3 meetings ago. They have to be auctioned, but then you have to have another piece of property to
Right.
purchase.
Yeah.
So it's a complicated process. As a public entity, we just can't throw the for sale sign up and say, give me your offers.
but
It
I think
doesn't work
the
that way.
discussion goes back to I think they're obviously showing the need for additional elementary schools, and the need, even with the additional elementary schools, for the additions in the near term.
Yes.
Because the near term of the additions, get additions or modulars, or raising class sizes to a level our community hasn't found acceptable. And people remind me when I say 24 kids in a kindergarten class, because that's a district average, that could mean 25 or 26 or 28 in the 4th or 5th grade class. And our community has not found that to be acceptable. So I think we have to, that's still on the table in the near term, but the numbers certainly show near-term additional classroom space even beyond 2 elementary schools. So what allows us to bridge that gap?
I agree, and if Sharon, if you go back to that first slide, the historical slide too, the other thing too, I think that changed for us, remember in the last 18 months on our projections was when we went to the classroom versus the student numbers. So Jack and Sharon and the committee did a great job last year of really changing our mindset on that, how that appears, and how we use that as a better predictor of what what Ralph used to call his tails and seats. But it is a much better way for us to look at what do, and I think it gives you, Jackie, and correct me, it gives you some flexibility to move those things around a little bit more. I mean,
there's flexibility, and it's really just more accurate to account for the specialized learning centers and the preschools that do exist in our elementary schools and have very specific requirements on those classrooms that are more strict than a 24-to-1 district-wide ratio. Each classroom has a specific set of regulations that has no flexibility. So by adding that into the forecast, I do think it gives us much more accuracy.
And
And
Mrs. Hatfield,
we don't
correct?
want to dwell on preschool. We've always had preschool, but one, it's growing rapidly, and two, those ratios are much smaller. So when you're looking at 570 preschool students right now, that is significantly different than 570 fifth graders. And I think when we're looking at that more specifically, and the SLCs more specifically, and in the past, we were predicting elementary schools based on the design capacity of the building, which was a building code element, and it wasn't necessarily how many students we actually could have or wanted to have in a school.
We have a hypothesis on why preschool is growing faster than
Because it's awesome.
Yeah. It's well liked, honestly. It's a great service. It has a good reputation. We see in general that students with disabilities, families of students with disabilities are moving to the district for services that they receive in the district.
But
I think
also
based on our reputation.
Isn't it the age? I mean, we have a lot of young families moving into our,
that's certainly
and it serves the young families.
I'm going to throw something out there. You mentioned it back in the beginning as one of your options, and that's putting elementary students at a high school. And we did do that when Olentangy opened, because the only other building we had was Shanahan at the time.
Sure.
But I think I know the reason why not to do it, but why isn't that a viable option?
So in order to overflow the kindergarten into a high school space, set aside any concerns or discussion about
Right.
kindergartners in a high school.
Which worked out very well when we did it.
You have to pick up those students wherever they live. You hit a point at which their home school fills up, and then the newly enrolled kindergartners come to this new space at, say, Berlin, or even at Olentangy High School, which will have a lower enrollment. Our footprint, while our district boundaries are the same, our footprint is much larger now. There's more developments that buses would have to go into to get those students and bus them to a central location, or really a not central location in the case of Berlin. For most of the district lives on the opposite side of the district than Berlin High School, if you're looking at our south population density. So our many buses going to many developments to pick up students, the potential cost savings that provides is likely lost in transportation.
And that's a good point, Julie, because the building is the center of the concentric circles. And then the other things that go with it, the operating costs, the transportation costs, the logistics, and all the other pieces that continue to radiate out from that building is what tips the feasibility of that kind of situation, or even the feasibility of a property location.
Which is why the committee liked the idea of the additions and that 35 classroom elementary school moving forward, because it saves on operation costs. You saw that the classroom cost is actually cheaper in that slightly larger building.
And then when you do the additions, do you do it so you don't have to add capacity in your commons area?
Yeah, could you?
So the additions would take the classroom or a school from a 29 classroom school to a 35 classroom school. What we know is that we really can't run more than 31 K-5 classrooms in a school building. So that sets aside those additional 5 classrooms for SLCs or preschool that don't necessarily factor into, the SLCs would, but they factor in the regular classroom number anyway, in terms of music, PE, art, and the cafe, or the cafeteria. Preschool students don't use those facilities. So it basically creates enough room in those schools for the school to operate as is, given the features of the facility, and to accommodate the preschool.
And because, the other thing with using those addition spaces for SLCs and preschools, it wouldn't require us to redistrict.
Oh, that's the big bonus. You know,
Wow, you dodged that
Yeah,
one.
you add on, and hey, Alum Creek, you don't have to get redistricted or whatever, you know?
Now.
Right, yeah.
Now, until the next elementary school, but it would save us in transportation and kids' time on the bus and.
And so are we ready to shift to funding? Yes.
Sorry, please,
We're
yeah,
ready to shift.
we got to.
Yeah,
But we're
sure.
ready- Yeah, I'm ready, we're going to have to get there anyway.
We're going to talk about the way to accomplish this.
Right.
So the theory, we would use the authorization from elementary 16 to fund the additions. Under the guise that authorization was provided to give us elementary capacity. We're just achieving that capacity in a different way.
Different format.
It actually
different
will
footprint.
use not the full authorization because we're only doing additions. Is that fair?
Right, what do we have? What's that? What was authorized again, Mrs. Hatfield?
So it was on our 2011 bond issuance. We have approximately $14.9 million left in voted authority that was on that ballot item and approved by taxpayers to issue. But that came in 2011, which was one of the biggest economic downturns that we've seen. And so we just didn't issue the debt. We didn't build the additional elementary at that point. So those bonds could be sold. They could be sold fairly quickly, within a couple of months, to help pay for additions and have cash on hand to do renovations as we further the discussion. With that $14.9 million, that would definitely be enough for 3. As part of the presentation, we talked about, Sharon and Jack talked about the cost for that. So that would be about $3.5 million for 3 would put us in under that availability that we have on those UTGO bonds.
Just a question.
Yes.
Bruce, you did you helped with the costing of those additions, right? So that's current
Pricing.
today with inflation and all the things. And, I mean, you're current with that cost,
Yeah, that number would be current as if you move forward this year with that.
Okay.
Because the cost of an elementary has changed from when
Yes.
those bonds were
Correct.
approved. It's gone up because of building costs and because of changes in the building code.
Yeah, if we were going to go standard elementary, we would not have enough money to
Right.
achieve that.
We'd have to go for a new
back.
ballot issue and.
Yeah, we'd have to go for a new ballot issue.
Correct. We have some other options in terms of financing. If we would, decide to go to a 4-site component or 4 additions, there are options for permanent improvement, levy tax anticipation notes. There are also opportunities to use certificates of participation or COPS. Borrowing, which both of those components are non-voted or unvoted resources that we could draw upon to help fund a larger project should we choose to do that. Those items are more expensive than issuing general obligation bonds, and they require that we secure the debt payment with either permanent improvement levy resources or general fund obligation resources. And so we would have to take that into consideration as we move forward in looking at our permanent improvement plans that we have for our PI dollars currently, and/or general fund implications if we would choose to secure it with general fund debt, with general fund dollars. So they're a little more complex, but they are available as we move forward and discuss our options.
To just interrupt, we did look at doing 4 additions at this point, and it didn't really push out the date of needing elementary 16. So we thought with the available money and the fact that you would still need that 16 at that same year, that it didn't seem like that would be the best option. That's why we were presenting the 3 additions. I mean, obviously, any classroom is helpful, but it didn't change the date of elementary 16.
But it could have an impact on 17 potentially, because when you look at those out-year enrollment projections, you have less certainty about the economy and the enrollment growth. So any additional classrooms help, obviously.
Lots of information.
That was a
to
lot of
digest.
information, yeah.
So timing,
Timing is very critical for the
On the
additions, because if you're looking at, I apologize that is so small, but you have a printout of it. If you want the elementary additions to open in 19, working backwards, you have to make the decision now.
I mean, not today, but
Tomorrow is fine.
Tomorrow is fine, yeah.
I'm out of town by
We
proxy.
got graduation on
No,
Sunday.
it's important to make a
Yeah.
decision quickly. We would need to move forward on drawings. This would be something that would need to be drawn. We would need administration's input on exactly what they would want in those additions. We'd have to pick which elementary schools you would be adding on to and starting that process with the different utilities and building departments and zoning and all of that to make sure that those decisions that we make are the best moving forward. And it is tight to get them open in 19.
Can you go back to the slide with of the map?
Oh, yeah.
So if we have to make some quicker decisions, does the facilities committee have a recommendation on what 3 locations?
We
serve
had
the
a
most?
list of ones that we like best, again, based on the utilities and the amount of space that we have and drop-off zone and all that. Wyandotte Run, and these are circled on there. Alum Creek, Arrowhead, Cheshire, Indian Springs, Scioto Ridge would be next, and Freedom Trail.
So we've identified where it's possible, and we have a cost understanding of each site.
Let's talk students, though.
Yeah, we'd have to go through, we're not ready to pick for sure which sites. We know which are ideal. I'd want to go through with the leadership team a little bit closer. And
So that's an item that I think we have to see, is you have to rank those for us, right? Are we in agreement with those? Based
Just
the
on facility standpoint,
population.
the
Not on
order.
just facilities, but on like what?
Right. For just facilities on page 10, those that are listed are sort of our order of
Oh, you listed it in order.
ease, just site-wise and
Well, that's ease
utility-wise.
versus,
Right, exactly,
Kids.
right.
And so I guess let me clarify. I've looked at that from an academic perspective and through the lens of the facilities committee. That's what we think would be best. What I'm saying is I have not yet taken it to the leadership
Understood.
team to look
No, no.
closely and
No, that's fine.
to verify.
Well, you
So-
have a new job now.
Sure. we can do
put that on you.
And then
What was the enrollment?
there's
Was
one
the
elementary school that we ruled out altogether because it cannot work, and that's Oak
Oak
Creek.
Oak Creek.
But because we've stabilized the K-5 enrollment throughout the district, for the most part, there's still, we've kept some of the buildings purposely low to accommodate preschool space there. We didn't just need to look at it from an additional capacity standpoint, but remember, since the additional capacity is being used immediately for primarily preschool and SLC, they can theoretically go. I would say the most central locations would probably be the best because of how we're going to feed them with preschool and SLCs. where that, we have more specialized learning centers on the east side of the district because there are just more people.
More people there.
Still two-thirds, that's where the population is.
So for Mrs. Hatfield, then, let's theoretically assume, or let's just say that that's with that option. What's then the operating burden for the 3 additionals? Have you looked at those numbers of what that additional operating burden would be?
At this point, that would contain utilities and some of those operating expenditures. I don't have a specific number to that yet, but we could.
Well, teachers
put it
go up with
together.
our growth.
They would go up
That's
to growth,
part of
but.
the
Right.
five-year
So, I mean,
forecast.
if you could maybe take a peek at that and give us a feel for what that, it doesn't sound like it's going to be crushing, but we have to know what that is.
But you're not adding an additional principal,
Right.
additional counselor,
No,
additional.
no, but there's still an operating cost regardless, so. it would be
What
good
I'd
to know
also
what that
like
is.
us to look at is preschool tuition, because if preschool demand is increasing costs, tuition should reflect that increased burden.
Yes,
But what's your ratio of paid versus
Right.
free?
So the state law says you have to have, I'll use eight, you cannot exceed 8 in the classroom, 8 students with disabilities. And what you should have for those 8 students with disabilities to achieve the least restrictive environment is then 8 peer role models. So we charge the tuition only to the peer role models, because that's who we're allowed to charge the tuition to. But we have to make it low enough that they want to be here because we need them, but not so high as to deter them, because they're the ones, we need them.
You need them for the learning
If it's so high that you
opportunity.
can't get them, it causes a problem, there's probably a sweet spot there that it could increase.
That's my point, is I'm
Yeah.
not saying double tuition, but tuition should reflect the cost.
Market.
Absolutely.
I thought you
And
did an
market.
analysis like a year or so ago and found that we were competitive.
I don't know that, we're certainly not competitive with private preschool. I think we're probably competitive with other public districts and what they're charging for peer role models, but I think to Mr. O'Brien's point, they're not necessarily our competition because they're in a different district and their kids aren't eligible to come here and ours aren't eligible to come there, so we can look at it again for sure.
Really, the competition would be private within the boundaries.
Right.
So, Mrs. Hatfield, one last question I have, I'm sorry, is, so we're at 3 additions at 10.5, budget factor moving up to 11, and we're at 14?
Yes.
What can that other 3 million be used for?
Or do we
So,
raise it?
Capital costs.
I'm not convinced we just raise the money because we can versus raising what we need, I think is your question.
Yes, that is my question. Thank you.
Issuing, yes,
Issuing.
issuing the bonds.
Yes.
so the question is, what could we use the remaining money
Issue.
for? What could we issue it for? Because of the purpose clause within the bond, we can use it for additions on facilities, new construction. What we cannot use it for is leasing or doing other facilities that currently exist or leasing current facilities. So we really would want to take a look at just issuing it for the additions rather than issuing it all and maybe throwing something else in there. Meaning, I don't know if you were thinking, do we purchase the building that we're in with it?
This
Do we
building.
add other things to it?
Just asking the question.
No, it makes sense. I don't think that purchasing this building would be a part of that.
That's fine.
But purchasing that building could be a part of a future levy or
Understood. I
ask.
mean, because that was one of the things that the board talked about, is we don't want to lease this building ad infinitum. We want to find a point at which we can
And there's
purchase
nowhere
it.
left to go.
That is correct. That is correct, but we do, from a business perspective, it's better for us to own it than to lease it. At some point, we do not, it's not a good business model.
What about issuing what you need for the additions? Can you then hold off on the other 3 million and issue that when you're going to build your next one? Because we promised the voters that it would be used for an elementary school.
It's a good-
So you could use the majority of it for the additions and then 3 million on your
Cons-
elementary 16. It won't, it'll cover maybe a third of it,
A mill.
but yeah, that's a mill. One mill less that you
Yeah,
have to
I mean,
ask.
absolutely, I mean, that,
We'd have to understand arbitrage, right? How long can you sit on that cash before you use it, right? Because
Or don't issue it.
Well, we
until
haven't
you're gonna
issued it,
Don't
do
so
issue
we
it if you
can't.
need it, but it does take about 6 months. What about if we found the perfect location for an elementary school? Can we use it to purchase land for an elementary school?
I don't,
I would have to check on that purpose. I don't know that it can be used for land, but I can double check on that, on the purpose clause to
Yeah.
see if it does include that.
And my
Right.
concern is that the voters approved it for a building, not for land, and not to purchase an administration building. You know, they approved it
No,
for
that's-
elementary.
Yeah.
I'm just concerned about, you know, what you tell your voters
no,
you're
I'm
approving.
I'm not going to argue that at all. I think it's just, the idea is, we have multiple pieces of this game in play over the next 3 to 10 years. So how we build a model to use what has been authorized versus what we're going to ask for. We just have to be strategic in that, because we also don't want levy fatigue, and we don't want to.
Right.
But they approved that issue in 2010, thinking we, again, anticipate elementary to be open far sooner than 2021, 2022 in that school year. So we'll have to be really clear about our messaging with what we're doing and why we're doing it. But the reality is, we didn't build a building we didn't need, and we didn't open a building and operate a building
Right.
we didn't need. So we are doing what we always do in this district, and going to the brink of the time we need things, asking at the last possible minute before we start putting an additional tax burden on our residents. So this, I think, moving forward with this concept of additions is a new concept that we, are exploring, and it is elementary capacity. So
Yeah, it's the sharp edge of being fiscally responsible and pushing your design build plans out to the very outer limits. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been here 20 years, and many of you have been here longer. It's what we're used to, but we got to do it.
I would also add, with the issuance of the debt that we have authority for, issuing that debt would not push our no new millage concept out of the way. We would
Okay.
still be able to issue that 14.9 million, or up to that 14.9 million, without increasing the effective millage rate on the debt. So in terms of increasing tax dollars to do it immediately, it is voter authorized, and it would not affect the effective millage rate for the debt burden,
Okay,
as it stands right now at 7.5 mils.
that's good.
That is the good news. Anybody have any other questions?
No, that's a good report. No, but we're going to have to,
Yeah.
At the June board meeting?
At the June board
We're
meeting.
here to
I
vote.
would
We
sure
have
hope
to
so.
dedicate some,
I would sure hope so.
so is there,
I don't know if we'll have to discuss what it is, a resolution or some
Yes.
kind of board action.
Yes.
So we'll have
Yes,
to
it would be a
consult.
resolution or board action to sell those bonds.
is there a June facilities
There's-
Yes.
committee meeting?
And there's 2 board meetings in June, too.
Yeah.
Well,
So Dave-
if we're going to go for it, it needs to be at the 14th.
the first June.
Oh,
Right.
but don't you have to present it first and then
We'd have
vote
to
on
present
it
it.
the second?
At the 14th.
Isn't
I
that,
think you're right.
I think it
I think it takes
requires
2 meetings.
2 meetings
Meetings.
to issue the bonds.
But the meeting's on the 4th. So Dave and I sit on the facilities committee meeting and try to attend. I have not been a very good board member because I'm traveling for work. But, so if any of the other board members want to go in our place to
Yes,
ask
certainly.
more questions and be more engaged and get more things answered, because we're already exposed to it all the time, would you let us know, and then we'll make sure that we can follow all the Marcus of Queensberry rules on how many board members
I
can
would say
sit in
it's
each
very
place.
helpful, because
Yeah, and Mindy's been to one as well, so, and
Been to
2, that's right. So I don't know if Kevin and Julie, if you want to.
Kevin, come
but
on.
just let us know.
I've been to 8
That's
facilities
that
committee meeting at
meeting.
one point.
Been on that committee many
They didn't
years.
ask me back.
it is our hardest working committee,
Yeah.
and, growth is our most prevalent issue here in Olentangy, is the fastest growing school district in Ohio. So thank you for your work.
I don't have any more questions. I've
Yes,
I've
Jack,
dominated
I think we
enough.
need your wish list,
Yep.
and to move forward.
Sure. Some of the numbers and some things from Emily as soon as you can.
Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Hatfield, do we have any public participation regarding our action items
We might have
tonight?
to have a special.
No, we do not.
Well, then,
So now that we passed that policy, is this the last meeting we'll have to 2?
Yes.
Yes.
So June will go to
Yes.
1? Okay.
Yeah, it'll go to
Right.
one next meeting.
So I'll take a motion to approve our board policy update.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bartz?
Yes.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Patrick?
Yes?
Yeah, we have to do a special
Thank you.
meeting.
All right, now please present your treasurer action items.
Yes, please, I would like to present treasurer action items A through G for approval, please.
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Bartz?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
And Mrs. Patrick?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Rafe, please present your superintendent. intended
I
action
would
items.
like to ask Mr. Rafe to pull out item 6, Exhibit C10.
B6.
B6, yes, please, thank you.
So I will first present item B6.
Thank you.
For approval.
Move.
Yeah, B6, Human
Oh, wait,
Resources.
I have that.
What?
B6 or D?
B is in boy.
B as in boy.
Is in
Okay.
boy, B6. It's approved classified substitute workers for the 18-19 school year, specifically condition background checks, et cetera, that for complete clarity, Mr. Bartz's son is one of the
I got to abstain,
substitute
so
workers.
it's the worst kept secret in the district.
He doesn't want to vote no on his son, so he has to abstain.
Oh, I would vote no on that kid every day of the week.
Okay, I'll move.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Please call the roll.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mr. Bartz will
Abstain.
Thank you. Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
And Mrs. Patrick?
Yes?
Thank you.
Now you get the rest.
Yes, I'm going to present the remaining superintendent action items, A1 through 11, the remaining B items, and C through L. Before, I would like to highlight, we have 4 staff members in attendance, since you guys have been sitting through this whole ordeal.
Very long.
Kimberly Kelly, our new assistant principal at
Stand up. Who are they?
Berlin High School.
Hello, welcome.
Aaron Gibbons, a new drama theater teacher. Yeah,
Welcome.
had to be dramatic. Morgan Thornberry, broadcast journalism. And Stan Nicholson, who's a study hall monitor.
All right.
Our list that are here that I didn't. Go ahead, tell me your name. I'm sorry, I didn't get to meet you.
We met 8 years or 10 years ago
Oh.
when I graduated. Erin Litchfield.
Oh, Aaron, yay. Yes.
Well, welcome, Aaron.
Congratulations and welcome.
I should get an award for attending a very, very
And calling out the
lengthy board
superintendent
meeting.
prior to
That's
approval.
worth that's worth the time investment.
Former students always. All right, so those are the remaining items. Thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll.
Mr. Bartz?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
And Mrs. Patrick?
Yes.
Now we have one remaining item.
Operating officer, too.
Hello, Mr. Meyer.
This is off. So I'd like to present action item 15A, approve supplemental employment for Catherine Rafe as a building leadership team member and for extended school year services.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Bartz?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mrs. Patrick?
He always has to give the ball.
To hesitate.
Does like the hesitation.
I also wanted to congratulate Superintendent Rafe. He and his wife are grandparents this week.
Yes.
Isn't that exciting?
Speaking of congratulations, how about Dr. Fetty's recent PhD?
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Did you get your new business cards yet?
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations. When
Well,
did
'cause
you
we're not
manage
gonna
to
approve
finish
this.
that?
Slowly but surely.
Okay, well, congratulations.
Good job, Doc.
All right, so we will adjourn. Oh, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, I'll take 2 seconds.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mrs. Fiesel,
Yes.
Mr. Bartz?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
And Mrs. Patrick?
Yes. All right. Well, thank you for attending. We'll see, hopefully, some of you on Sunday at our commencement ceremonies, or until we meet back here on June 14th.
Speaking of